You're listening to Dark Rain Chronicles. The rain hides many things, but it also remembers. Secrets washed away, voices swallowed by the storm. These are the stories it brings back, and tonight, you will hear them. The missive arrived on a leaden afternoon, materializing without fanfare in my tarnished letterbox. A fatigued envelope, my name inscribed across it in meticulous, almost hesitant script. Within, a terse message conveyed an inheritance, an antiquated chalet nestled deep in mountain country, bequeathed by distant kin whose faces were mere smudges in memory. I'd anticipated nothing from that branch of the family tree. They'd withered from my life years prior, leaving no tendrils to grasp. Yet the letter was unequivocal. I was the new custodian of a solitary structure in a geography utterly foreign to me. Curiosity, perhaps, or the mercenary glimmer of a potential sale. Whatever the impetus, I resolved to investigate. A bag hastily packed, I pointed my car towards the unfamiliar horizon. Daylight was bleeding behind jagged peaks when I finally navigated the winding ascent. The heavens bruised indigo and slate. The air, thin and sharp, bit at my exposed skin. There it sat, the chalet, perched on a swell of land commanding a view of the shadowed valley below. It wore its age heavily, splintered porch steps, paint peeling like sunburnt skin, a roof that hinted at celestial views through unseen gaps. Shutters hung askew, fractured. A wilderness of weeds and desiccated grass choked the yard, bisected by a meager path snaking towards the entrance. It possessed the aura of a place long abandoned by human tread, though the letter insisted otherwise. I killed the engine beside the porch, the abrupt cessation of mechanical thrum plunging me into a profound, unnerving quietude. No birdsong pierced the stillness, no breeze sighed through the skeletal trees, only silence, thick and watchful. Retrieving my bag, I mounted the porch. Each footfall coaxed a groan from the protesting timbers, releasing a faint perfume of decay and settled dust. The key, delivered alongside the letter, turned stiffly in the lock. The door yielded, then jammed halfway, demanding a forceful shoulder shove before granting passage. Inside, gloom reigned, softened only by the weak diffusion of twilight through grime-streaked windows. My hand scrabbled along the wall, finding a switch. A solitary overhead bulb sputtered reluctantly to life, casting a sickly yellow pall over a narrow hallway. The walls bore indeterminate stains, and a subtle miasma of dampness hung in the air. My shoes left clear impressions on the fine silt coating the floorboards. Then, a discordant detail snagged my attention. Other footprints, recent ones stark against the undisturbed dust, suggesting another presence had preceded me. They tracked away, veering towards a room off the right. Trailing these phantom marks, I entered what appeared to be a living area. A hearth of rough-hewn stone dominated one corner, its maw cold and choked with the gray ghosts of long-dead fires. Opposite, a dilapidated sofa slumped, flanked by a scattering of forlorn chairs. The footprints marched directly into the room's heart, fading into ambiguity near the fireplace. A prickle of unease traced my spine as I stooped, examining the disturbed dust. It was as if someone, or something, had stood there, only to vanish without leaving tracks leading away. knot tightened low in my gut. Depositing my bag on the sofa, I sought more illumination, coaxing reluctant life from another aged fixture. I paced the room. Shelves lined one wall, burdened with brittle-spined books and assorted curios. A uniform blanket of dust coated everything, save for peculiar streaks, smears where the gray film had been wiped clean, for reasons I couldn't fathom. I dragged a finger across a shelf. The dust clung, a dry, unpleasant second skin. Then, a soft thump sounded behind me, like knuckles rapping gently on wood. I whirled, finding only empty space and dancing dust motes in the lamplight. My inaugural night unfolded in deceptive quiet. Upstairs, I located a small bedchamber seemingly less oppressed by dust than the others. My suitcase found a perch on a spindly chair. Cracking the window admitted a sliver of frigid air. I stripped the bed of its musty linens, half expecting to uncover forgotten family albums or intimate effects, but the drawers gaped emptily. The closet harbored only a few moth-ravaged jackets. A corner lamp, when activated, offered feeble radiance, just enough to navigate the confined space. Around midnight, a distinct poppies, the sound of combusting timber, startled me awake. Simultaneously, I registered a creeping warmth in the air. Sitting bolt upright, I peered into the darkness. A faint, flickering luminescence emanated from downstairs. My heart hammered against my ribs. My mouth turned instantly arid. Gripping the flashlight I'd kept close, I crept onto the landing and descended the creaking stairs. The source was the living room. Turning the corner, my breath hitched. Flames writhed merrily within the stone hearth I'd found cold and lifeless hours before. The wood appeared freshly stacked. Heat radiated outwards, washing over my face. A quick scan of the floor revealed the earlier footprints had vanished, obliterated beneath the scattering of new ash and wood chips. Someone had deliberately kindled this fire. My hands trembled slightly. Seizing a nearby poker, I disturbed the burning logs, a futile gesture, seeking some explanation for this impossible event. After minutes spent mesmerized by the hypnotic dance of the flames, I retreated, leaving the fire to exhaust itself. Back upstairs, I left my bedroom door ajar, sleep remaining an elusive quarry for the rest of the night. Morning arrived with a stiff spine and a dull throb behind my eyes. The living room hearth was cold again, a repository of gray ash. Stepping outside offered a lungful of sharp air and a vista of sun-drenched peaks, majestic, yet failing to dispel the unease clinging to me like the damp. No broken panes, no forced locks beyond the front door I myself had opened. I resolved to spend the day meticulously exploring the chalet's confines, hunting for clues to the clandestine visitor. The structure comprised 2 stories and a small cellar. Upstairs, beyond my temporary bedroom, lay 2 additional rooms. One functioned as a study, a desk littered with disordered papers, a pair of chairs, and towering bookshelves crammed with ancient leather-bound volumes. I sifted through the documents on the desk, mostly archaic records detailing property lines and ownership transfers. Names surfaced, vaguely familiar echoes from childhood anecdotes. One yellowed sheet noted the chalet's susceptibility to moisture damage, necessitating repairs. No mention, however, of any current occupant or caretaker. The other room housed a gallery of portraits. Hung against time-darkened walls, men and women in severe formal attire stared out from canvases filmed with age-dulled varnish. Their expressions were uniformly blank, yet their eyes possessed an unnerving quality, seeming to track my movements regardless of my position. Drawn closer to one, a man whose jawline and nose resonated with a faint, disquieting resemblance to my grandfather. I could discern the individual brushstrokes. His painted gaze was stern, fixed intently upon me. A chill permeated my chest. My hand brushed the heavy frame. It shifted slightly, precariously hung. Downstairs yielded a kitchen and a modest dining space. The kitchen boasted appliances that looked museum-ready, unlikely to have functioned in decades. Cupboards overflowed with dust-furred tins and crockery, seemingly undisturbed for generations. In the dining area, a large table stood surrounded by chairs. The tablecloth bore ancient stains, and the room exuded a faint, cloying aroma of stale cooking fat and stagnant air. One chair was pulled back from the table, angled as if recently vacated. The familiar tension constricted my chest once more. As afternoon shadows lengthened, the urge to flee warred with a stubborn compulsion to remain. This place, unsettling as it was, constituted my inheritance. Moreover, a gnawing need to understand propelled me forward. A squatter? Or was my own psyche playing tricks? The basement beckoned as the final territory to chart before dusk claimed the day. The door, adjacent to the kitchen, protested with a low groan as I pulled it open, releasing a wave of musty, subterranean air. A switch near the top illuminated a single bulb dangling over the descending stairs. The cellar wasn't expansive. A workbench stood cluttered with derelict tools. Crates leaned precariously against the damp concrete walls. My flashlight beam swept across the floor. No footprints here. It did, however, catch on a series of heavy metal hooks suspended from the low ceiling beams, perhaps for curing meats or some forgotten purpose. More boxes huddled in a corner, labeled with dates and names, some stirring faint recognition as belonging to relatives. Curiosity overriding caution, I pried open a couple. They disgorged a cascade of faded photographs, brittle letters, dust-laden keepsakes. Flipping through them felt intrusive, heavy. Each item seemed a tangible link to lives I barely comprehended. Faces stared up from sepia-toned squares, caught perpetually in that same remote, silent regard. Time slipped away unnoticed in the subterranean gloom. By my return upstairs, the sun had dipped low, painting the sky in fiery hues. I resolved to prepare a rudimentary meal, if only a tin of soup scavenged from my bag. Finding matches, I wrestled with the ancient stove. After several sputtering clicks, a weak, hesitant flame bloomed beneath one burner. I heated the soup, consuming it directly from the pot while leaning against the kitchen counter, ears straining against the profound quiet of the chalet. It was a silence that felt less empty than expectant. That evening, I lit several candles in the living room, the single bulb's erratic flickering grating on my nerves. Seated on the sagging sofa, I watched the candlelight throw distorted, leaping shadows across the walls. My gaze kept returning to the empty fireplace, a shiver tracing its path down my spine as I recalled its spontaneous combustion the night before. I decided against an early bedtime, opting for vigilance. Around 9, a soft scrape emanated from near the front door. My heart leaped. Rising cautiously, I moved towards the hall. Nothing. The front door remained shut, the hallway dim and deserted. Then, from the floor above, came a low, protracted creak, the sound of weight settling on a loose board. My fists clenched. Looking upwards, I half expected a face peering down from the landing's shadows. Only darkness met my gaze. My pulse throbbed in my ears. Ascending the stairs, each step elicited a groan from his aged wood. Reaching the upper hallway, I felt a distinct, cool draft. The door to the portrait room stood slightly ajar, though I was certain I'd closed it. Inside, the painted figures maintained their silent vigil. My flashlight beam traversed the row of faces as I advanced. Then I saw it on the floor. Faint impressions in the dust, shaped like bare feet. They led directly towards one portrait in the far corner, that of a stern, middle-aged man with close-cropped hair and a rigid posture. My stomach churned as I approached the painting. The footprints terminated abruptly at the wall, directly beneath the canvas. Hesitantly, I reached out, touching the frame's lower edge. It tilted outwards. Concealed behind it was a small, recessed compartment, carved into the wall. Swallowing hard against a rising dryness in my throat, I pushed the portrait fully aside. Within the niche lay a leather-bound journal and a diminutive brass key tethered to a loop of twine. The journal's cover felt stiff, cold to the touch. I thumbed through its pages, scanning lines of unsteady, spidery script, whispers of family secrets, oblique references to archaic traditions, and recurring mentions of what the author termed the bloodline's obligation. One sentence leaped out. He is compelled to return when the cycle dictates. My hand began to tremble anew. Pocketing the journal and the key, I felt a sudden, urgent need for open air. Another creak echoed in the hallway behind me. The door to the adjacent room seemed to shift fractionally on its hinges, as if nudged by an invisible current. Staring at it, heart pounding a frantic rhythm, I forced myself to turn away. Down the stairs I hurried, fumbling with the front door latch and stepping out onto the porch. The night air was crisp, almost painfully cold. My breath plumed in ragged bursts. I stood gazing at the immense, dark silhouettes of the mountains, thoughts reeking chaotically. Who lit the fire? Whose bare feet imprinted the dust? What obligation did this journal speak of? The chalet loomed behind me, no longer just wood and stone, but a palpable entity, breathing a cold, watchful presence. No nocturnal animal sounds, no distant glow of neighbors, only the profound isolation and the unsettling weight of the house. After several minutes absorbing the frigid clarity, I retreated inside, securing the door and methodically checking the window latches. Returning to the living room, I attempted to steady my breathing. The candles had burned low, casting guttering, anemic light. Retrieving the journal, I opened it again. Its pages chronicled family gatherings laced with cryptic undertones, spoke of hidden documents, and detailed unsettling phenomena within the chalet itself. Footsteps in empty corridors, disembodied voices, furniture rearranging itself. The writer alluded repeatedly to an ancient promise demanding fulfillment. I sat immersed in these troubled pages, a strange calm settling over my initial panic. Then, a distinct dragging sound scraped across the floorboards directly overhead, like a heavy chair being pulled across bare wood. I shot to my feet, nearly upsetting a candle. Flashlight clutched tight, I bolted upstairs once more, calling out, "Is anyone there?" My voice sounded thin, swallowed by the oppressive silence. No answer. The chair in the study had been moved. It now sat squarely in the center of the room, facing the doorway. Its seat remained thick with dust, yet the floorboards around its legs showed signs of recent disturbance, scuffed as if it had been deliberately repositioned. Backing slowly out of the room, I declared the night's explorations concluded. I returned to my bedroom, shut the door, and engaged the lock. Placing the journal on the bedside table, I slipped the small brass key beneath my pillow. Lying rigid in bed, I stared at the ceiling, every creak and settling groan of the old house jolting me to high alert. My mind circled endlessly around the footprints, the hidden compartment, the journal's ominous pronouncements. Sleep eventually claimed me, but it was a shallow, fitful state. By the third night, the atmospheric tension had thickened, becoming almost tangible. Objects migrated with increasing frequency. Doors I'd firmly closed were found open. Footsteps echoed from unoccupied rooms. The fireplace rekindled itself at unpredictable hours. I existed in a state of heightened alert, starting at the slightest noise, skin clammy despite the pervasive chill. The entire chalet seemed sentient, its awareness focused solely on me. Faint whispers skittered at the edge of my hearing, real or imagined. Passing the portrait gallery now induced a physical tightening along my spine. Their collective gaze felt like a physical weight. I kept the journal near, poring over its cryptic passages, searching for the key to this escalating strangeness. One passage resonated. Those who inherit must heed the summons. What summons? The nature of the call remained obscure. I knew only that I was profoundly not alone, and something within these walls desperately sought my attention. On the fourth night, deep into the suffocating quiet around 2 in the morning, I was jolted awake by the sound of my bedroom door rattling violently. The knob turned, slowly, deliberately, testing the lock. It held. I sat frozen, paralyzed, heart slamming against my ribs like a trapped bird. After agonizing seconds, the rattling ceased. I heard soft, distinct footsteps retreating down the hallway. In that moment, stark realization dawned. Evasion was no longer viable. The presence wasn't merely ambient. It was immediate, tangible, right outside my door. I remain within this chalet. Departure feels less like an option than a betrayal of some unspoken contract. The nights intensify, each dawn revealing fresh evidence of the unseen forces that walk these corridors. A shifted floorboard, a displaced object, a lingering cold spot. The sensation of being watched is constant. I feel compelled to continue my investigation, despite the visceral fear that coils within me. This place, it doesn't feel entirely malevolent, yet neither is it benign. It waits, patient and persistent, demanding comprehension. What it requires of me, I do not yet know, but a certainty settles deep in my gut. The chalet will not release me until I unravel its secrets. Ancient timbers and spectral whispers held little sway over Elias. Pragmatism was his creed. Yet when an advertisement surfaced, a dwelling in the city's time-worn quarter offered at an improbable pittance, he succumbed. The proprietor, a Mr. Silas, presented a lease as sturdy-looking as the house itself, demanding a rent that barely grazed Elias's dwindling reserves. Signature scribbled, keys in hand, Elias craved only solitude and solvency. He could not have foreseen the nights punctuated by desiccated scratching from the void above, nor the attic hatch, a slab of wood not merely closed, but seemingly barricaded against emergence. He took possession on a Tuesday drenched in a persistent drizzle. The porch, broad and sighing, greeted him first. Planks yielded beneath his weight, a soft decay that hinted at the structure's deeper frailties. Inside, however, the bones felt sound. Paint curled from the walls like sunburnt skin, yet the floorboards remained steadfast beneath a patina of dust. A cloying scent permeated the air, redolent of forgotten libraries left to molder in damp cellars. Elias dismissed it. The siren song of affordability drowned out lesser concerns. The following day was consumed by the ritual of nesting. A sofa, weary from its thrift store afterlife, found its place in the living room. The galley kitchen, compact and slightly askew, boasted cabinets that hung with a charming imperfection. His bedroom offered a single window overlooking the quiet street, framing the nocturnal glow of a solitary lamppost. Though the bathroom fixtures were relics, they functioned. Minor eccentricities, he reasoned, were the price of independence. It was on his second day that he encountered it. A door, nestled inconspicuously near the passage to the kitchen. Initially mistakable for a linen closet, it lacked any knob or handle. Instead, a flat panel of wood was aggressively secured, fastened shut not only by 4 or 5 thick nails, but also by twin metal brackets gleaming dully against the aged timber. It had to be the attic access, hermetically sealed. A faint tremor of curiosity stirred within him, quickly quelled by indifference. He broached the subject when Mr. Silas materialized with a spare set of keys. The landlord offered only a shrug, a gesture practiced in its vagueness. Best left undisturbed, he advised, his gaze drifting away. Elias pressed, inquiring about valuables stowed away. Nothing worthwhile, just debris, Silas countered, pivoting smoothly to the refuse collection timetable. The abrupt deflection registered as peculiar, yet Elias, preoccupied with job hunts and navigating his new surroundings, let the matter rest. That initial week unfolded with a deceptive tranquility. The house maintained a sepulchral quiet, the neighbors' spectral figures glimpsed only fleetingly. Elias often lingered on the porch as dusk bled across the rooftops, observing the slow fade of light. The street hushed save for the occasional passing car, but nightfall brought whispers from above, a faint, dry skittering, like something brittle being drawn across bare wood. Rats, perhaps, or squirrels seeking refuge in the old bones of the house. Such intrusions felt plausible. A trip to the hardware store yielded an arsenal of traps, dutifully deployed in shadowed corners and near potential entry points. One sentinel stood guard near the sealed attic hatch, a speculative gesture. Days passed. The traps remained barren, yet the nocturnal rasping persisted, a delicate scraping confined exclusively to the ceiling overhead. Elias sought solace in headphones and late-night films, though sometimes beneath the dialogue and soundtrack, he perceived a heavier resonance, a muffled concussion, a dull weight settling, infrequent yet arresting. One night, balanced on the cusp of sleep, he felt it, a subtle vibration descending through the plaster ceiling. It possessed a rhythm, dragging and uneven, horribly suggestive of footsteps. His pulse surged, a frantic drum against his ribs, though he fought for calm, attributing it to some nocturnal creature constructing its nest. Still, his heart hammered, and a cold sweat bloomed on his brow. Morning light found him scrutinizing the attic portal once more. The nails, the brackets, they possessed a newness at odds with the surrounding decay. Though the wood around them was weathered, the metal shone faintly, as if recently installed or replaced. His fingers traced the seam of the door, encountering rough edges and a sliver of darkness where a thin draft, cool and cellar damp, kissed his skin. He considered levering a nail free with the hammer's claw, but recalled Silas's oblique warning and retreated. Old timbers shifting, he told himself. Just the house settling. That evening, the sounds intensified. Reclining in bed, phone casting a pale glow, Elias heard a scraping noise so visceral it raised the hairs on his arms. This wasn't the timid scratch of before. It was protracted, laborious, the friction of significant weight being dragged across the floorboards directly above. He sat bolt upright, heart thudding against the cage of his ribs. The house held its breath around him. He listened, straining into the silence. Nothing. Then again, the slow, dragging sound, pulsing almost palpably through the ceiling. He rose, moved into the hallway, positioning himself directly beneath the sealed hatch. Its outline was faintly visible in the gloom spilling from the kitchen. Holding his breath, palms slick with sweat, he realized his hand was clamped white-knuckled around the bathroom doorknob. A soft thud resonated from above, like something dropped. Then abrupt silence descended and held fast for the remainder of the night. Sleep, however, remained elusive, his mind a frantic maze of questions. Animal, human, and Silas's secrecy. Why? The following day, a message left for the landlord went unanswered. Elias tried to banish the memory of that dragging weight, busying himself with cleaning the living room, seeking distraction in mundane tasks. Yet, every upward glance sent a knot of apprehension tightening in his gut. The television murmured, a futile attempt to populate the heavy silence. Night fell, bringing with it a heightened state of vigilance. Elias lay in the dark, listening. Around midnight, the scraping resumed. Brief bursts of sound, pause, then repetition. Each iteration seemed to traverse the attic space, from one unseen boundary to the other. His chest constricted, his jaw ached from clenching. After an hour of this relentless pattern, endurance failed him. Flashlight in hand, he padded towards the hallway hatch, phone poised to record whatever unseen drama unfolded above. As he neared the door, a minuscule creak emanated from the ceiling. He swept the flashlight beam upwards, illuminating only aged wood and the spectral lace of cobwebs. Running his free hand along the panel, he applied gentle pressure. The door yielded slightly, infinitesimally, but the nails and brackets held firm. The impulse to pry them loose surged again, but the profound quiet held sway, and he backed away, resolving to act only if the sounds returned. Sleep was a forgotten country. Morning revealed a note resting on his kitchen counter. He must have neglected the lock. The message read, "Everything is fine. Please don't try to open the attic. I'll handle any issues." No signature, no elaboration. A chill traced its way down his spine. Silas had entered his home unannounced, likely while he slept. And the prescience. How could he know Elias contemplated breaching the seal? He dialed Silas's number, voicemail. He left another message, feigning concern about animal damage, detailing the noises. Silence was the only reply. He slumped onto the sofa, grappling with the violation of the landlord's clandestine entry, yet perversely relieved at the prospect of resolution. Perhaps pest control would be summoned. He attempted normalcy, groceries, a visit to a local cafe, but an undercurrent of profound unease shadowed his movements. That night, the activity commenced around 11. This time, it was unmistakably footsteps, not dragging, but slow, deliberate pacing, a steady, metronomic tread. Elias's heart hammered, flashlight beam stabbing upwards. He approached the hatch again. He felt the vibrations through the soles of his feet. Then, his light caught something that made him swallow hard. The brackets weren't merely nailed. They were secured with thick screws, their heads sunk deep. On the inside, an architecture of containment designed to prevent egress. The pacing overhead ceased abruptly, as if his presence below had been detected, listened for. His thoughts spiraled. An animal seemed increasingly improbable. Animals didn't pace with such measured intent. His hands trembled. Enough. He fetched a screwdriver, hoping to find purchase on the screw edges from his side, but the angle was impossible. The door was fortified from within the tenebrous space above. Nausea churned in his stomach. Retreating to his bedroom, he locked the door, switched on a lamp, and resigned himself to a sleepless vigil. Around 3 in the morning, another faint drag whispered through the ceiling. Then, utter stillness reigned. Dawn broke, pale and uncertain. Elias called Leo, a friend residing an hour distant. He needed help. Now. He offered scant details. The place felt wrong, deeply unsettling, the landlord unresponsive. Leo, blessedly unquestioning, arrived by noon. By evening, the bulk of Elias's possessions choked the bed of Leo's truck. As they hefted the final boxes towards the door, both men instinctively looked up at the sealed attic hatch. The brackets remained solid, their metal faintly luminous in the gloom. Leo let out a low whistle, eyeing the nails, the implied screws. "Ever get a peek inside?" he asked quietly. Elias shook his head. "No, and I don't plan to." He locked the house, left the key on the kitchen counter as instructed by the note, and walked away without a backward glance. Mr. Silas never contacted him regarding the broken lease or the deposit. Silence swallowed the entire episode. Elias found refuge on Leo's couch for several weeks while securing a new apartment. Even now, the image of that sealed attic door triggers a visceral tension, recalling the thuds, the dragging, the pacing. He remembers Silas's cryptic note, the man's palpable anxiety, focused solely on keeping that portal shut. Sometimes he idly wonders if another tenant occupies that space now, perhaps feeling the same unease, maybe even finding the courage, or folly, to pry open that stubborn hatch. The thought twists his insides, but sleep comes easily now. Escape was the only imperative. What resided in that sealed upper dark remains an enigma, a large, trapped creature, something less easily categorized. He would never possess the answer. He knows only this. He will never again inhabit aged walls without first exploring every shadowed recess. The memory of that barricaded door, a silent testament to something unknown it contained, still prickles his skin. He'll gladly pay a premium for transparency, for a space where every square inch is accounted for, where the only sounds above are the wind and the rain, not the furtive movements of whatever remains trapped in the darkness overhead. Let someone else inherit that discovery. Elias is content simply to be gone. Static spat from the nursery monitor, a dry electric whisper in the otherwise tranquil house. Then, beneath the hiss, something else materialized. A voice, low, intimate, undeniably male, slithering directly into my ear like a physical touch. I see you. A knot of ice formed deep in my belly. My body locked, eyes wide and unblinking, flew to the dead-bolted front door, a flimsy shield, then clawed their way up the shadowed staircase, leading to where the children slept. An intruder. Here. Impossible. And the chilling corollary that bloomed in the dark. How long had invisible eyes been observing us? My name is Clara, 17, adrift in the strange currents of senior year, earning college funds watching the Ashworth's children. They were good people. Lily, 5, a sprite with solemn eyes, and Leo, just 2, a bundle of unchecked energy. Their house, usually a sanctuary of comfortable routine, had hosted me countless evenings without incident. Until this one tore the veil of normalcy. The night had begun like any other. My arrival at 6, the brief exchange as Mr. and Mrs. Ashworth vanished into the dusk for a rare evening out. Pizza money on the counter, emergency numbers magnetized to the fridge, the familiar directive, children asleep by 8:30. We'll aim for midnight, Mrs. Ashworth had offered, her smile warm. Call if anything comes up. Hours dissolved into predictable rhythms. Cheesy crust, the clatter of board game pieces, the splash and gurgle of bath time, culminating in the soft click of bedroom doors, closing on sleeping forms. I'd retreated to the living room sofa, textbook open under the lamplight, embracing the quietude. That's when the first tremor of unease struck. A flicker at the edge of sight, a fleeting motion past the large picture window. I rose, peered out into the sodium vapor glow bathing the empty lawn. Nothing but stillness. A passing car, perhaps a stray cat. I dismissed it, yet returning to my studies, I couldn't shed the sensation, the prickle of unseen scrutiny, raising the fine hairs on my nape. Every settling groan of the old house became a potential footfall. I flicked on the television, hoping its artificial chatter would drown the burgeoning anxiety. Just beyond 11, the monitor delivered its venomous message. Primal instinct shrieked, "Run! Flee the house, find help, dial for the police." But Lily, Leo, upstairs, vulnerable. Leaving them was unthinkable. What if he was already there? My hand, trembling violently, reached for my phone. Its smooth surface felt alien. Calling seemed too dangerous. The sound might betray my position. A text. Fingers fumbled on the screen. Emergency. Someone in the house. Call police. Sent. Almost immediately, the screen lit up. Mr. Ashworth calling. I stabbed the decline button, my heart slamming against my ribs. terrified the ringtone had carried upstairs. Another frantic message. Can't talk. He's upstairs with the kids, please hurry. His reply flashed back, a sliver of hope in the suffocating fear. Police on their way. We're coming home now. Stay safe. I remained rooted at the base of the stairs, my pulse a frantic drumbeat surely audible throughout the silent structure. Ascend, confront him, try to extract the children, or would that escalate the danger? Before the choice could solidify, I heard it. Footsteps directly overhead. Slow, deliberate, pacing from one room, pausing, then moving to the next. Then, oppressive silence fell once more. The monitor crackled alive again. Come upstairs, Clara, the voice whispered, laced with a horrifying intimacy. The children want to say goodnight. Nausea surged. Panic clawed at my throat. My name. How did he know my name? What had he done to them? My eyes darted to the phone, praying for the distant flash of blue and red lights. But the street outside remained stubbornly dark, quiet. Deep breath. Steady. I had to act. I couldn't cower here while a madman held sway upstairs with those innocent children. My gaze swept the room, searching for a weapon. Anything. It landed on a substantial ceramic table lamp. Not much, but better than bare hands. I wrenched the plug from the wall socket, the cool pottery slick against my sweaty palm. Placing my foot on the bottom stair, I flinched as it groaned loudly, a cannon shot in the stillness. I froze, straining to hear any reaction from above. Nothing. Cautiously, deliberately, I began the ascent, each step an eternity. The silence pressed in, broken only by my own ragged breathing and the frantic thudding in my chest. Reaching the landing, I hesitated, the hallway stretching before me like a dark gullet. Which room first? Lily's was closest. The door stood slightly ajar, revealing a deeper slice of blackness within. I pushed it inward, the hinges emitting a faint squeak that grated on my nerves. The room swam in shadows, faintly illuminated by the soft glow of a unicorn nightlight. I could discern the small shape huddled under the covers, apparently asleep. But where was he? I crept towards the bed, reaching out to gently shake the small form. Lily, I whispered urgently. Lily, wake up. We need to go. She didn't move. Cold dread tightened its grip as I pulled back the duvet. Pillows. A careful arrangement of pillows mimicking a sleeping child. A floorboard creaked just behind me. I spun, lamp raised high, ready to strike. But the doorway stood empty. The hallway beyond remained still, steeped in shadow. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. Where were they? Where was... I backed out of Lily's room, eyes scanning every shadow, every corner. Leo's room was next. The door was shut tight. With a hand that shook uncontrollably, I reached for the knob. The instant my fingertips brushed the cold metal, I heard it. A giggle. Unmistakably a child's, floating up from downstairs. I froze, mind reeling. How was that possible? I'd been standing guard at the bottom of the stairs. No one could have slipped past me. Unless they were never upstairs to begin with. The realization struck me like a physical blow. The intruder hadn't been upstairs. He'd been downstairs with me. the entire time. And now he had the children. I turned, desperate to race back down, but as I did, the door to Leo's room swung silently open. A figure stood silhouetted against the profound darkness within. He was tall, impossibly tall, his head nearly brushing the top of the doorframe. "Hello, Clara," he rasped, the same chilling whisper from the monitor. "I've been waiting for you." Thought evaporated. Pure reaction took over. I swung the lamp with every ounce of strength I possessed, aiming for the unseen head. A sickening, wet crunch echoed in the narrow space, and the silhouette crumpled without a sound. I didn't wait to see more. I fled, hurtling down the stairs, taking them two at a time, nearly tumbling in my haste. I could hear them now, clearer, the children's voices drifting from the kitchen. I burst through the kitchen door, braced to grab the kids and run, but the scene stopped me cold. Lily and Leo were seated at the kitchen table, happily spooning ice cream into their mouths. Standing beside them, looking startled and then deeply concerned, were Mr. and Mrs. Ashworth. "Clara," Mrs. Ashworth exclaimed, her brow furrowed. "Are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." I stood there gasping, my mind struggling to reconcile the terror with this mundane reality. "But the intruder," I stammered, gesturing vaguely upstairs. On the monitor, I heard him. Mr. Ashworth stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Clara, there's no one else here. We came home a bit early and found the kids still awake. They said you told them they could have a midnight snack." I shook my head, mute, unable to form the words. This couldn't be right. It had all felt so terrifyingly real. Mrs. Ashworth guided me to a chair, her face etched with worry. "I think you might have fallen asleep, dear. Had a nightmare, perhaps." As the sharp edges of adrenaline began to dull, insidious doubt crept into the void. Had it all been a dream? A stress-induced hallucination? But the vividness... But I hit him. I mumbled, the memory stark. "Upstairs. With the lamp." Mr. Ashworth excused himself, his footsteps receding up the stairs, then returning a few moments later. "All the lamps are exactly where they should be, Clara, and there's definitely no one up there." I sat numbly as they offered reassurances, attributing the experience to exhaustion, the pressures of school, a bad dream, nothing more. They insisted on driving me home. But as I gathered my belongings, still trembling internally, the feeling persisted. Something was fundamentally wrong. Dream or reality, the fear had been absolute. The voice, the feeling of being watched, the phantom upstairs. It clung to me, too potent to be mere imagination. As Mr. Ashworth navigated the quiet, darkened streets towards my house, I stared blankly out the window. One certainty resonated amidst the confusion. I would never babysit again. Never. Wait. What was that? A flicker in the rearview mirror. Not just reflection. A shape. Taken form in the back seat directly behind me. A pale face materializing from the gloom, stretching into a horrifying grin that seemed to hold far, far too many teeth. My head whipped around. Nothing. just the empty upholstery of the back seat. Shadows cast by the passing streetlights. Just my frayed nerves playing tricks. It had to be, didn't it? Memory clings to the afternoon the pipe organ materialized, unheralded, amidst the drizzle that slicked the cobblestones outside my workshop. A consignment of vintage violins, destined for a discerning local collector, had just been swaddled and crated. Rosin dust and the ghost of aged varnish still filmed my hands. Then, the bell chimed, an insistent summons against the gray symphony of the rain. Opening the heavy oak door revealed two figures wrestling a towering sarcophagus of raw timber, its surface scarred by transit, a stenciled address nearly obliterated by weather and wear, a clipboard thrust forward, a signature scrawled, and they deposited their burden squarely in the heart of my workspace before retreating into the downpour. Their departure as abrupt as their arrival. There it stood, this monumental crate, radiating a palpable dampness, its edges splintered like fractured bone. Hesitantly, I traced a line across the rough wood, rewarded with a sharp bite of splinters in my palm. A crowbar served as my key, the protesting shriek of drawn nails echoing in the cavernous workshop as the lid groaned upwards and thudded aside. Revealed beneath were the uppermost pipes of an antique organ, their metal surfaces clouded with tarnish, the wooden framework a tapestry of scratches and time's abrasions. Near the base, a small, elegantly faded label whispered its provenance. Constructed 1842. No city, no maker's name readily decipherable, only an indistinct flourish of a signature lost to scrutiny. My craft is restoration, the patient resurrection of harpsichords, the meticulous revival of clavichords, the tuning of venerable pianos, even the occasional dalliance with vintage guitars. Yet, a pipe organ of this nature, compact yet aspiring skyward with its graduated rows of pipes promising unique tonal breadth, was a creature outside my direct experience. The console bore the patina of long, perhaps damp, decades. The keys, yellowed like old teeth, hinted at prolonged exposure. Its wooden legs, though substantial, possessed a subtle instability. Circling it, I inhaled its peculiar aroma, an evocative blend of musty ecclesiastic vaults and the spectral scent of extinguished candles. This instrument had undeniably weathered eras. A call to the patron who had dispatched it yielded little clarification. Acquired at an estate dispersal in some forgotten European hamlet, its history remained shrouded. His instructions were simple: restore its voice, tune its complex soul, render it playable for his private assemblage. Disconnecting the call, a ripple of disquiet washed over me. Nothing overtly spectral clung to the organ, yet an inexplicable chill traced my spine. Resolutely, I began the initial survey. Armed with a focused beam of light, I probed the bellows, inspected the ranks of pipes, scrutinized the wooden skeleton. Cobwebs draped like funereal lace, layers of dust lay thick as velvet, and faint scars spoke of earlier, perhaps less adept, interventions. The underlying craftsmanship, however, commanded respect. Minuscule, near invisible engravings adorned each pipe. Patterns faded almost beyond perception. The subsequent 2 days were devoted to a careful ablution of the exterior. Gentle soap, tepid water, soft cloths. The ritual unfolded slowly. my workshop filled with the scent of damp wood yielding its history, mingled with the metallic tang of aged pipework. With each pass of the cloth, minute scratches emerged on the metal, seemingly deliberate yet indecipherable, like a forgotten script. Tentative pressure on the keys elicited soft, internal clicks, echoes from the dormant mechanism. The bellows, stiff with disuse, drank the offered oil gratefully. By the close of the second day, years of accumulated grime had surrendered, leaving the organ looking brighter, yet profoundly ancient. Day 3 dawned with a decision to awaken its voice. Connecting a small foot pump, a familiar tool for breathing life into such antiquities, I directed air towards the bellows. My finger depressed the lowest key. A sound emerged, not a note, but a low, guttural groan that startled the quiet air. Undeterred, I proceeded. The next key yielded a tone marginally clearer, less burdened. I coaxed a sequence, ascending hesitantly. The workshop became a vessel holding a strange concoction of sound. Notes flat and sharp, dissonant whispers, voices struggling for coherence. A peculiar pressure bloomed behind my eyes as that brief, discordant melody unfurled. At first, I attributed it to the resonant vibrations, the disturbed dust motes dancing in the air. Then, peripheral awareness snagged on the shadows clinging to the walls. They seemed to pulse, to deepen unnaturally. A glance upward confirmed the slow, pendulum sway of the overhead lamp, defying the stillness of the air. My wristwatch insisted time held steady, yet an internal dissonance hummed, a sense of temporal dislocation I couldn't grasp. Attributing it to frayed nerves, I resolved to cease for the day, the click of the lock echoing my unease. Sleep proved elusive that night. The spectral pipes imprinted themselves behind my eyelids, their hesitant, rough-edged sounds replaying in the darkness. Twice, I awoke abruptly, heart hammering against my ribs. Living alone in the modest apartment perched above the workshop offered little buffer from my anxieties. Drawn by an unseen current, I descended the stairs. The workshop lay submerged in shadow, save for the weak intrusion of a distant street lamp through the tall window. The organ loomed, a silent monolith. Switching on a solitary lamp, I approached, my own reflection wavering dimly on the tarnished metal pipes. Silence reigned. No creaks, no whispers disturbed the profound quiet. Just another intricate job, I told myself sternly, retreating upstairs, though the knot of apprehension remained tightly cinched in my gut. Morning brought the commencement of the true restoration, the tuning. My specialized kit, wrenches designed for delicate adjustments, precise gauges, lay ready. Systematically, I began the painstaking process of calibrating each pipe, referencing its pitch against the unwavering electronic tuner. Hours, potentially days, stretched ahead, dictated by the instrument's recalcitrance. As I fine-tuned the initial cluster of pipes, the very air in the workshop seemed to thicken, acquiring a tangible weight. The rhythmic tick of the old wall clock faltered, adopting a strange, syncopated beat. My gaze fixed upon it as the second hand stuttered, froze momentarily, then leaped forward erratically. A jolt went through me. My phone, retrieved for a temporal cross-reference, flickered, the screen dissolving into momentary static before resolving to the correct time. Comprehension eluded me, yet the work demanded continuation. In Engaging a particular high note elicited a sharp, resonant tone that seemed to momentarily starve the workshop lights, causing them to dim perceptibly. Simultaneously, across the room, tools arrayed neatly on my workbench shifted, not falling, but subtly sliding inches across the surface as if nudged by an invisible tremor. My chest constricted. Releasing the key restored normalcy. The lights flared back to full intensity. The tools settled. Sweat beaded on my palms. An electrical surge, I rationalized, clinging to mundane explanations. Yet, as I persisted with the tuning, each time a specific frequency was achieved, reality seemed to subtly warp. Shadows elongated unnaturally across the floorboards. My reflection in the pipes would momentarily dissolve and reform, like a disturbed pool of mercury. The clock continued its erratic dance, pausing, skipping seconds. At one point, striking a particular chord provoked such a violent flicker from the overhead lamp, I braced for shattering glass. Instead, it simply steadied once the chord died away. I ceased, sinking onto my stool, heart galloping, forehead damp. Was this some arcane mechanism embedded within the organ, or was my own perception fraying? Documentation seemed the logical recourse. Setting my phone upon a tripod, I initiated a video recording, intending to capture these anomalies while playing simple scales. The moment sound filled the air, the small screen dissolved into flickering static, intensifying with the more dissonant notes, then blacking out completely. Silence restored the camera's function. Subsequent tests confirmed the phone's integrity. The video file, however, was irrevocably corrupted. A dull ache began to throb behind my temples, my muscles strung tight. Stepping outside, I drew the cool, damp air deep into my lungs. The street offered a quiet tableau, punctuated by the occasional passing car. Leaning against the brickwork of my sanctuary, I consciously slowed my breathing, the frantic pulse gradually subsiding in my ears. After several minutes of enforced calm, I returned within. A cautious resolve formed, continue the tuning, meticulously, note by note. Perhaps perfect harmony was the key, the antidote to these unsettling shifts. If the instrument could be brought into complete consonance, perhaps its strange influence would cease. Approaching the console, I tested a middle-range note, slightly flat. The overhead light gave a nervous twitch, less pronounced than before. Reaching behind the pipes to make the adjustment, my hand trembled, dislodging a small wrench that clattered starkly onto the wooden floor. Tightening the tuning slide, I tested the note again. Closer. True. The light remained steady. A fragile tendril of relief unfurled within me. Then, the adjacent pipe, a semitone higher. The instant its voice sounded, a wave of intense pressure slammed against my eardrums, a disorienting sensation akin to sudden submersion. The very corners of the room seemed to warp inwards, bending perspective. Nausea surged, my balance faltering. I recoiled from the console, releasing the key. The sensation vanished, leaving behind a pounding heart, goose flesh prickling my arms beneath a sweat-soaked shirt. Should I abandon this? The thought warred with the professional imperative to finish, compounded by a nascent fear. What might happen if left in this unstable, half-tuned state? Would its influence continue to bleed into the workshop? Caution became my watchword. Sipping water, forcing measured breaths, I steadied my trembling hands enough to grip the tools. Adjusting the offending pipe stopper, I pressed the key once more. A cleaner note emerged, the surrounding air felt normal. A slow exhale escaped my lips. Over the ensuing hours, I progressed in minute increments. Each pipe wrestled into tune, lessened the severity of the accompanying disturbances. Yet, any miscalculation, however slight, provoked a response. A tremor through the floorboards, a frantic flickering of lights. Once, a shelf behind me vibrated with such violence that several small, antique instruments rattled precariously. Catching my reflection in a mirror across the room, I saw a stranger staring back, eyes bloodshot, face drawn and pale. Still, I pressed on, until only the highest pipes remained. Here, the true battle commenced. These delicate, high-frequency voices demanded excruciating precision and seemed to provoke the most potent reactions. Striking one particular note unleashed an abrupt, unnatural chill into the air. My breath plumed visibly, despite the workshop's stable temperature. The overhead lamp began a slow, wide swing on its chain. My reflection gazed back from the polished pipes, but grotesquely altered. Mouth stretched into a silent scream, eyes unnervingly large. A blink, and the distortion vanished, leaving only my own strained features. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Forcing my focus onto the tuner's needle, I made infinitesimal adjustments. The chill receded. Finally, tentatively, I played a full, ascending scale. From the lowest resonant hum to the piercing clarity of the highest note, the sequence flowed, almost perfect. The tones blended, creating a sound that was warm, complex, and deeply resonant. I held my breath, waiting, for the room to spin, for shadows to writhe. Nothing. A profound stillness settled. My body ached with an exhaustion that felt bone deep, as if I'd spent the day hauling granite. Stepping back, I listened to the organ's quiet hum. The pervasive, musty scent lingered, yet seemed fainter, less oppressive. The lamp hung motionless. The old clock ticked with unwavering metronomic steadiness. With renewed hope, I set up the phone again, recording as I played a short, simple piece. This time, the video remained stable. The phone recorded faithfully, capturing only the slight camera shake induced by the organ's powerful vibrations. Even the highest notes produced merely a faint, transient wobble in the image. No static, no blackout. Relief washed over me. Checking the footage confirmed its normalcy. I slumped onto a nearby chair, mopping sweat from my brow, my arms feeling leaden. My gaze remained fixed on the organ, half expecting a final, defiant act of strangeness. It remained impassive, looking merely like what it was, an exceptionally old, meticulously crafted instrument. My breathing remained shallow, my pulse stubbornly elevated. The job was done, I assured myself. Restored, tuned, and somehow stabilized. The how and why of its ability to subtly manipulate the surrounding environment remained opaque, likely interwoven with its unique construction, its long and silent history. I contacted the patron. The organ was ready, playable, I reported, carefully omitting the litany of unsettling phenomena. It required delicate handling, I added, possessed certain quirks. He expressed satisfaction, promising swift arrangements for collection. Hanging up, I sat enveloped by the workshop's returning silence, watching the organ, vigilant for any sign of its latent power. None came. Over the next few days, I tested it intermittently. Minor anomalies persisted, playing with excessive force or venturing into certain complex chords. My might still induce a faint flicker in the lights, a momentary pause in the clock's rhythm, but these were pale echoes of the earlier chaos. Gentler playing, I discovered, minimized these effects. Maintaining its perfect tuning seemed crucial. Any slippage, any note drifting from its calibrated pitch, appeared to strengthen the organ's unsettling influence. Eventually, the truck reappeared, bearing the same two impassive delivery men. They loaded the instrument with practiced care, secured it, and drove away, seemingly oblivious to the subtle tensions clinging to their cargo. I watched from the workshop doorway, a familiar tightness constricting my chest. Relief warred with a lingering unease. The workshop itself felt subtly altered, as if the very space had been stretched taut and then allowed to snap back, leaving residual strains. I closed the door, the lock clicking shut with finality. The following day, I immersed myself in the familiar rhythms of my trade, repairing a cello's fractured grace, restringing a weary vintage guitar, banishing dust from cluttered shelves. Yet my thoughts kept circling back, drawn inexorably to the memory of the organ. That is the chronicle of my encounter with a centuries-old pipe organ that warped the edges of my reality. No heroism marked my actions. I simply tuned it, clung to composure, and resisted the urge to unravel. What fate awaits it in the hands of its new owner remains unknown. Perhaps confinement in a silent room, perhaps exhibition in some private gallery. Frankly, I harbor no desire to learn its future. The chill returns whenever I recall those resonant notes bending the world around me. One thing is certain. I shall be declining commissions involving pipe organs, at least for the foreseeable future. I've had my fill of reality's fragile boundaries for one lifetime. Dusk was painting the sky in bruised purples and fading oranges when I arrived, the cabin crouching lower against the earth than I pictured. Silas, the proprietor, a man whose haste suggested he found the place as unsettling as I might soon, pressed a single, skeletal key attached to a rust-pocked chain into my palm. His words were sparse. He wasn't often about. Call if necessary. Then, a swift departure, his vehicle dwindling down the track. I lingered on the abbreviated porch, a flimsy wooden stage overlooking the morass that bled away from the cabin's foundations. Still water, dark as obsidian, mirrored the sky's dying embers through a slick, oily film. The air hung thick, redolent of sodden leaves and the deep, fungal breath of mold. A scent I initially accepted, almost welcomed, believing this damp solitude the perfect crucible for the words I'd come here to forge. My single valise in a cardboard box brimming with provisions felt heavier crossing the threshold. Inside, the space constricted. A narrow cot hugged one wall, facing a diminutive table flanked by two rigid chairs. A short counter served as the meager kitchen. Brown water stains crept up the walls near the floorboards. Testament, I surmised, to the swamp's occasional incursions. A clammy dampness permeated everything, leaching into the very grain of the wood. In a corner squatted an old gas stove, its enamel scarred from long use. Cupboards yielded a scant collection, mismatched utensils, a pair of plates, one solitary cup. Electricity, at least, functioned, though the lone ceiling bulb offered a hesitant, sputtering light. Through the thin partitions, the swamp murmured its ceaseless litany. Frogs offered their guttural chorus. Something else rustled, a dry, sibilant sound from the encompassing reeds. A tremor traced its way down my spine, dismissed as the simple unease of solitude in an unfamiliar territory. Unpacking my laptop, I settled it onto the small table. Connection proved elusive. No internet signal graced the screen. My phone, too, struggled, eventually registering a fragile bar after a minute's strained effort. A minor inconvenience, I told myself. Focus was paramount. Distractions unwelcome. Yet the isolation felt suddenly profound, amplified by this severing from the world beyond the mire. When the sun finally surrendered, the swamp outside dissolved into velvet blackness. Drawn again to the porch, I watched the moon ascend, a cold disk swimming in a sky rapidly filling with fog that coiled like spectral serpents across the water. A plangent splash echoed from the far side, unseen. Then I noticed them, dull glimmers within the fog bank, like faint lanterns adrift near the surface. I narrowed my eyes, attempting to resolve their nature. Too large, too deliberate for fireflies, yet lacking the sharp glint of moonlight on water. They swayed with a languid, hypnotic motion, periodically swallowed by the mist only to reappear. My pulse quickened. For a full minute, breath held captive in my chest. I watched, waiting for them to advance. They remained, however, tethered to their distant station, drifting in slow, inscrutable patterns. A compulsion drew me towards the water's edge. The ground yielded beneath my boots, spongy and unreliable, like treading on decaying upholstery. Closer to the water, the smell intensified, a heavy, sour miasma of rot and stagnation. Fog clung tenaciously to the weeds, forcing me to lean in to pierce the veil. The lights flickered, perhaps 50 yards out. I strained to hear voices, any human sound, but only the muffled croaking and the wind's whisper through the reeds met my ears. A subtle shifting beneath my feet, the sensation of water flowing just under a thin crust of mud, sent a jolt through me. Teeth clenched, I retreated a step, my arms rigid, heart thrumming against my ribs. The starkness of my solitude, the profound unfamiliarity of this place, struck me with force. The lights persisted, unwavering. It was time to return to the fragile shelter of the cabin. Inside, I attempted to write, but the spectral lights dominated my thoughts, phantom images superimposed on the blank screen. Frustration mounting, I snapped the laptop shut. The overhead bulb buzzed with irritating insistence. I flicked the switch, plunging the room into deeper shadow, relieved by the silence. From a corner cabinet, I unearthed an old oil lamp. Its flame, once lit, cast a steady, warm glow, softening the cabin's harsh lines. After a time, a new sound emerged from the night, faint, pervasive, like distant murmuring. I held perfectly still, straining to decipher it. Silence fell abruptly. Setting the lamp on the table, I waited, motionless. It began again, a sibilant susurrus, as if two voices whispered secrets beneath the water. A chill permeated my skin, raising gooseflesh along my arms. I secured the door, acutely aware of its flimsy construction, the inadequacy of the simple lock. Dragging the small table against the entrance offered scant reassurance, a futile gesture against whatever lurked outside. Sleep, that first night, was a shallow, troubled affair. The oil lamp remained lit, turned low, casting distorted shadows that danced on the damp-streaked walls. Each time my eyelids drifted shut, the foggy lights materialized behind them, accompanied by imagined shapes slithering through the reeds. I must have succumbed eventually, for I awoke abruptly to profound silence. The lamp had guttered out, leaving behind a faint, acrid scent. My back protested the ancient mattress. Gray, indifferent light filtered through the single window above the cot, illuminating the ceiling's water stains, the rivulets of past dampness tracing paths down the walls. Shoving aside the thin blanket, I rose, a dull ache pulsing behind my eyes. A daylight reconnaissance seemed prudent. The morning air was a palpable entity, thick, humid, carrying that sour tang I could now taste. The vegetation surrounding the cabin was taller, denser than perceived the previous evening. Gnarled, low-slung trees stood half-drowned, their roots exposed like skeletal fingers clutching the mire. Mud near the water's edge sucked greedily at my boots, releasing them with a vulgar, smacking sound. I discovered a small clearing beside the cabin, sloping down into the swamp, the ground marginally firmer here. Green algae scummed the water's surface, fractured by pockets of impenetrable black. I scanned for tracks, for any sign of human passage, finding only the impassive stare of frogs on a log, the swift disappearance of a snake disturbed by my presence. Stillness reigned, yet underscored by a thrumming, unseen life. The buzz of insects near my ears, the subtle ripples betraying movement beneath the water. The bulk of the day was sacrificed to the altar of writing, fueled by canned provisions consumed at the little table. Claustrophobia began to press in, the low ceiling and stained walls feeling suffocatingly close. The swamp's pervasive odor seeped through every crack. Intermittent gurgles from outside sounded unnervingly, like the landscape drawing breath. Mid-afternoon, seeking relief, I pushed open the small windows. The resultant breeze offered no respite, merely circulating more damp, heavy air. Yet I left them ajar, hoping vainly to dispel the cabin's internal staleness. An uneasy knot tightened in my stomach, a blend of the pervasive smell and accumulating tension. The lights, they refused to leave my thoughts. Towards dusk, I ventured out again. Already, thin ribbons of fog were unfurling across the swamp's surface. My boots sank into the yielding earth. I listened intently, filtering the familiar chorus of frogs and insects, until a faint scraping registered. Reeds brushing against something solid, perhaps. I moved cautiously along the waterline, attempting silence, my heartbeat a steady, heavy drum against my ribs, palms slick with sweat. The sky deepened to bruised indigo. As the moon began its ascent, the fog coalesced, thickening into an obscuring shroud. And there they were. 3 distinct glows this time, tracing slow circles in the same general area as before, closer together now, their movements describing some unfathomable pattern. The thought of wading in, of confronting the source, sent a visceral clench through my gut. That water felt treacherous, its depth unknown. I remained rooted to the shore, watching. Suddenly, the whispering returned, softer now, muffled by the dense fog. My head felt strangely light, my mouth turned to dust. Instinctively, I crouched behind a screen of tall grass, peering into the gloom. No silhouettes emerged, only the dense reeds and the swirling mist. The whispering persisted for several seconds, then ceased as abruptly as it began. Rising, I swiped sweat from my brow and retreated hastily to the cabin. Inside, I threw the bolt and switched on the electric light. Its erratic flicker grated on my frayed nerves. Retrieving my flashlight, I tested its beam, strong and steady. I placed it within easy reach on the table. Sinking onto a chair, I consciously slowed my breathing, wrestling with the urge to call Silas. What could I articulate? Strange lights, odd noises. He'd likely attribute it to swamp gas, nocturnal creatures, local lore. I was committed to this place for now, the desire for quietude for my work warring with rising fear. Part of me clung to rational explanations, but a deeper, instinctual dread insisted something was fundamentally wrong. That night, the whispering intensified. It commenced around midnight, rising and falling in insidious waves. Words seemed to hover just beyond comprehension, distorted, as if filtered through dense fluid or thick walls. My hands trembled uncontrollably. I sat rigid on the cot, flashlight beam trained unwaveringly on the flimsy door, my chest constricted. Shadows writhed beyond the window pane. Periodically, a distinct tapping sound resonated against the cabin's side, a delicate scraping rhythm like fingernails drawn across weathered wood. My thoughts scattered, frantic. The impulse to flee, to pack and stumble through the darkness towards the distant road, warred with the palpable risk of navigating the treacherous track at night. Morning, I promised myself. I would wait for morning. Again, exhaustion must have claimed me. I jolted awake, drenched in sweat. Dawn was imminent. The whispering had ceased. My jaw ached from unconscious clenching. Tension had knotted my shoulders and stiffened my lower back. Rising unsteadily, I gulped water directly from the faucet, splashing my face in the small, stained sink. My reflection in the tarnished mirror above it was haggard, eyes shadowed, face etched with strain. After a meager breakfast, I stepped outside. The air felt heavier, the smell now tinged with something acrid, almost sulfuric. I decided to explore the swamp's edge in the opposite direction, seeking any clue to the light's origin. The undergrowth fought back, dense reeds and thorny shrubs tearing at my clothes. My boots plunged into unexpected pockets of mud, pulling free with effort. Sweat plastered my shirt to my back. Insects whined relentlessly near my ears. Small creatures rustled away at my approach. No other dwellings, no paths, no sign of human presence disturbed the scene. The swamp sprawled, a patchwork of stagnant water and impenetrable vegetation. Trees listed precariously, their roots exposed and tangled. An aura of pervasive decay hung in the humid air. An hour yielded nothing, frustration mounting. No hidden boat, no concealed track offered explanation. I returned to the cabin, defeated. The afternoon was spent in another futile attempt at writing. My focus fractured constantly. Every creak of the old structure, every unfamiliar sound from the morass outside, snapped my attention taut, leaving me frozen, listening. The knot of anxiety in my stomach remained, a persistent, cold dread. That evening, the fog descended earlier, rolling across the water and onto the bank, enveloping the cabin in its damp embrace. Just before complete darkness fell, I stepped onto the porch, flashlight in hand. Its beam sliced through the fog, illuminating perhaps 10 feet of visibility before dissolving into an impenetrable gray wall. A nearby splash startled me, I swung the light towards the sound, revealing only spreading ripples in the dark water. My heart hammered. My mouth was desert dry. Turning back towards the cabin, my eyes caught movement. A fleeting impression. A tall, stooped shape half hidden behind the reeds. It vanished the instant the flashlight beam touched the spot. I backed away slowly, keeping the light fixed on the empty space. The silence of the swamp suddenly profound and menacing. I scrambled inside. I bolted the door and, feeling foolish but compelled, wedged a chair firmly beneath the knob. My hands shook so violently I fumbled the flashlight, dropping it with a clatter. Extinguishing the flickering electric bulb, I relied once more on the oil lamp's softer glow. Outside, the darkness was absolute, the fog pressing against the window panes like a shroud. Condensation streaked the glass, transforming the interior into a damp, subterranean space. Around 9, the whispering resumed, louder, more insistent than ever before. It sounded like a multitude of voices now, overlapping, urgent, yet still maddeningly indistinct. I tried to barricade my mind against it, focusing fiercely on my laptop screen, but the sound seeped in, insidious. My breathing grew shallow, ragged. Sweat trickled down my temples. Near midnight, a resonant impact struck the cabin wall, a solid thud that jolted me upright, sending the chair skittering across the floorboards. My heart felt poised to burst from my chest. The whispering swelled, urgent, seemingly right outside the door. Grabbing the flashlight, I crept to the entrance, pressing my ear against the thin wood. I heard dripping, the distinct shuffle of movement in the mud outside. Panic flared. Should I shout, demand they leave? Fear paralyzed my voice, convinced any sound would only draw further, more terrifying attention. My mouth was intolerably dry. Swallowing felt impossible. I remained frozen there for an indeterminate time. 10 minutes, perhaps 30. Gradually, the sounds subsided. The whispering ebbed, replaced by the familiar, monotonous drone of insects. Yet, I stayed vigilant, flashlight clutched tight, until the first frail fingers of dawn probed the window. My entire body felt ravaged, drained, as if I'd spent the night wrestling unseen assailants. My hands were stiff claws around the flashlight. My neck throbbed with tension. The moment sufficient light suffused the gray morning, I moved. Laptop, clothes, stuffed haphazardly into my valise. A brief note left for Silas on the table, a curt explanation of early departure. The deposit was irrelevant. Escape was the only imperative. My stomach churned. My pulse remained erratic. Stepping onto the porch, the swamp appeared deceptively calm, gray and still in the nascent light. The fog lingered, a low-slung blanket just above the water. A distant splash barely registered. I hurried towards my car, parked a short distance away, the soggy ground sucking at my boots. I couldn't stop glancing over my shoulder, half expecting some nightmarish form to emerge from the reeds. The car started, its engine a comforting roar. A palpable weight lifted as I maneuvered away from the cabin. The dirt track, slick with mud, required careful navigation. In the rearview mirror, the swamp receded, the cabin's roof sinking behind the skeletal trees. My hands still trembled on the wheel, but I drove relentlessly until the main highway stretched before me. At the first gas station, I pulled over, killed the engine, and drew a long, shuddering breath. My shirt clung damply, my eyes felt gritty with exhaustion. Catching my reflection in the station window, I saw a stranger staring back, haunted, depleted. The whispers echoed in my memory. The ghostly lights shimmered behind my eyes. The phantom tapping resonated against my skin. Even here, miles away, a residual pressure lingered in my chest, the swamp's oppressive presence not entirely shed. But I was out. Explanations felt pointless. Gratitude for simply being off that blighted property washed over me. Back in the car, merging onto the highway, I felt the tension in my shoulders begin to uncoil as the miles accumulated. My singular goal now was distance and finding refuge somewhere solid, somewhere dry, far from any fog-choked swamps, their spectral lights, and the voices that whispered from the mud and weeds. I drove, watching the odometer tick upward, resolutely refusing to look back. A phantom cadence threaded itself through the twilight air of my house, a tune both exquisite and chilling, plucking at nerves I hadn't known existed. Owning a grand piano of venerable age had been a persistent dream, yet listening now to music woven from silence, I suspected the instrument I'd welcomed was merely a vessel for something far more ancient and unsettling. My name is Eliza. I am 34, navigating the neon labyrinth of Las Vegas by teaching music solace. A lifelong votary of classical strains and the tangible history of antique instruments, I was ensnared by a classified notice, a 19th century grand, offered by a local purveyor of relics. The shop itself was a labyrinth of forgotten histories, dense with the dust of decades. Tucked away, swaddled in dust-gray linen like a sleeping giant, was the piano. It was instantaneous devotion, the deep glow of rosewood, filigree like frozen lace upon its flanks, keys like aged teeth, hinting at countless untold melodies. Mr. Finch, the proprietor, a man seemingly stitched from nervous energy, vibrated with an eagerness to part with it. A remarkable instrument, he offered, his gaze skittering across the shadowed corners. But it possesses a past, you understand. Its last custodian was decidedly unconventional. Lost in the piano's gravitational pull, I barely registered his hesitant cautions. After a brief negotiation, it was mine. As Mr. Finch finalized the delivery arrangements, I could have sworn I saw a flicker in his eyes. Unmistakable. Deliverance. It commanded the space in my living room, a dark, resonant heart. That first evening, settling onto the bench, my fingers, extensions of some nascent longing, found the keys. A voice emerged, deep and sonorous, richer than any modern counterpart I'd encountered. I surrendered to the chromatic tides, playing until exhaustion sang in my muscles. Well past midnight, steeped in a contentment I hadn't felt in years, I finally sought rest. Yet, on the cusp of sleep, a whisper of notes seemed to rise from the shadowed parlor below. Surely, an echo of my own obsessive playing, I reasoned. The days that followed were steeped in musical bliss. Every spare moment found me tethered to the bench. I feigned illness one day, sacrificing work for the siren call of the keys. But subtle dissonances began to intrude. Scores migrated across the music stand untouched. Keys that momentarily resisted my touch would, an instant later, yield with unnatural fluidity. And persistent, that melodic undercurrent when silence should have reigned. a sigh from the instrument's soul. A week after its arrival, I was snatched from sleep not by a whisper, but by a tempest of sound. A full-throated, impassioned concerto flooding the house. Heart hammering against my ribs, I descended, each step a tremor into the unknown. The living room lay empty, bathed in moonlight, yet the ivories danced under spectral command, performing a composition utterly alien to me. I stood rooted by disbelief, by terror, until the final chord resolved into silence. Then, a voice, velvet and smoke, curled from the piano's heartwood. Ah, the new devotee. I wondered when you would attend. I spun on my heel, finding only moon-drenched emptiness. Who? The word fractured in my throat. A resonant chuckle, seeming born of the vibrating strings themselves. Permit me, Lysander Croft. Once this instrument's master, and now its resident. My grasp on reality frayed. This was impossible. Ghosts were the stuff of fiction, a delusion born of exhaustion. Your senses, I assure you, are tragically acute, the voice murmured, anticipating my thoughts, though the circumstances I concede are somewhat irregular. Through the slow lightning of dawn, Lysander unfurled his narrative. A pianist of considerable renown in the late 1800s, his talent was eclipsed only by his consuming ambition. Thirsting for fame, for a virtuosity that defied mortal limits, a bargain was struck, with forces best left unnamed, skill beyond reckoning, for the price of his essence tethered eternally to the wood and wire. It was incandescent for a time. Lysander's voice turned wistful, a sigh like dust settling. But immortality proves a gilded cage when fashioned from rosewood and string. I listened, suspended between fascination and dread. Logic screamed denial, yet an intuitive certainty resonated within me. Lysander's presence was palpable, a static charge thickening the air around the piano. What happens now? I asked when silence fell. And now, my dear Eliza, the true symphony begins. And so it did. In the weeks that unfolded, he unlocked harmonies I'd never conceived, guiding my fingers through passages of breathtaking complexity. My playing ascended to levels I hadn't dared imagine. Compositions flowed from me, feeling channeled rather than created. But the muse became a tyrant. Lysander demanded hours bled into days at the keyboard, his displeasure at any interruption manifesting as a palpable chill in the room. My world shrank to the 88 keys. Friends faded, work suffered, self-care became a forgotten luxury. My reflection showed a haunted stranger, eyes shadowed, fingers perpetually bruised. Brief moments of rebellion were punished. Objects would skitter across surfaces, doors slammed shut with violent finality. Once, I awoke to find my bed linen savaged by unseen claws. The need for help screamed within me, but who would lend credence to such a tale? Attempts to banish the instrument met with uncanny obstruction. Scheduled movers vanished. Transport inexplicably failed. An inexplicable inertia pinned me within these walls on designated days. The breaking point arrived on a night seized by a thunderstorm, rain lashing the windows like frantic fists. Hours I'd offered, blood smearing the ivory keys, Lysander relentlessly pushing me onward. A primal scream tore from my raw throat. No more. Silence descended, thick and suffocating. Then slowly, impossibly, the heavy rosewood lid levitated. Lysander's voice, when it returned, was glacial with fury. Insolence. Such gifts squandered on the ungrateful. Perhaps a soul with greater appreciation is required. The piano erupted, not with music, but with a cacophony of malice, a discordant jangle that set my teeth on edge. Frigid air stole my breath, misting before my eyes. Darkness coalesced in the periphery, assuming monstrous shifting shapes. I fled, bursting from the house into the deluge, the hellish anti-music pursuing me, clawing at my hearing even as I put distance between myself and the source. I ran until my lungs burned, until collapse seemed imminent. Through the storm-racked gloom, a steeple pierced the sky. Sanctuary. My fists beat a frantic rhythm against the heavy oak door of an old church. Father Gabriel, his eyes ancient and unnervingly understanding, surveyed my sodden terror without surprise. "Father," I choked out, the words torn by ragged breaths. "My piano. It's not empty." No flicker of disbelief crossed his features, only solemn recognition. "Such bonds exist," he murmured, his voice a calm anchor in the tempest. "Shadows cling to beautiful things, child. Let us see what light can achieve." What followed felt torn from some fevered dream. Armed with faith's ancient arsenal, phials of consecrated water shimmering like captured light, beeswax tapers flickering defiance against the gloom, texts heavy with forgotten tongues, we returned to the possessed parlor. The demonic fugue still raged within. Father Gabriel's Latin incantations wove a shield of sound, a counter-melody to the chaos, while my own prayers stumbled, ragged breaths against the storm. The rosewood leviathan bucked and shrieked under the assault, keys hammering discordantly. It levitated, a monstrous weight defying gravity, suspended in the charged air. Lysander's voice echoed through the room, a desperate symphony of temptation and threat, offering fame, riches, artistry beyond measure. We held fast, clinging to the ritual. Just as hope began to fray, as it seemed the darkness would overwhelm us, there came a sudden, incandescent detonation of light. The piano slammed down, the impact shuddering through the floorboards. Silence fell, profound and absolute. Cautiously, we approached the stilled beast. It seemed diminished, weary, somehow older. A tentative touch to a key produced only a single, deadened thud where vibrant music had lived. "He is unbound," Father Gabriel affirmed, his hand resting briefly on my shoulder, a steady anchor. The ensuing quiet was deafening, filled with the phantom limb of terror. Recovery was a slow dawn, pieced together day by quiet day. I found solace in a small group, others who had glimpsed the unsettling truths lurking beneath the veil of the ordinary. Slowly, I began to mend. The piano remained, a silent monument, a scar on the landscape of my living room, its voice choked to a dull thunk. Yet sometimes in the deepest quiet of the night, a fragile echo seems to persist, not Lysander's virtuosic rage, but a whisper of melancholy, a cautionary note on the perilous nature of desire. Music remains my language, but now I dictate the conversation. My students find me patient, perhaps overly so. They cannot know the previous spectral master I served. After Lysander, any earthly teacher seems gentle. My eyes were forced open to dimensions unseen, and I tread more carefully now, especially around relics whispering of murky provenance. But this ordeal also sharpened my awareness of the profound beauty in simple things. The hesitant triumph of a beginner's first scale, the unburdened warmth of shared laughter, the unadorned peace of an ordinary, quiet day. Lysander grasped for brilliance and found only eternal bondage. I wrestled the darkness and emerged, not unscathed, but whole, blinking into a quieter, more precious light. The hollow percussion of my own tread through the vacant passage raised the hairs on my neck. Nocturnal shifts at ironclad works always possessed a spectral quality, yet this particular night felt charged, pregnant. A palpable tension saturated the air, as though the aged edifice itself held its breath, anticipating some unseen catalyst. Little did I fathom that within scant hours, I would be a creature fleeing for its very existence, frantic to unveil a secret potent enough to sign my death warrant. My name is Elias. For half a year, I've navigated the graveyard shift at Ironclad as a custodian. The work lacks luster, certainly, but it keeps starvation at bay and affords me stretches of quietude to chip away at my novel. The works are a labyrinth. Corridors snaking into assembly floors, vast storage chambers slumbering, most sections dormant and mute under the cloak of night. This night commenced like countless others. I signed in at 10 bells, traded weary pleasantries with the departing day shift foreman, and commenced my circuit. The initial hours drifted by in a familiar rhythm. The swish of the mop across linoleum, the rattle of refuse into bins, the mundane ballet of sanitation. But somewhere around the second hour past midnight, the ordinary fractured. I was polishing brass near the executive suites when the murmur of voices reached me. Not inherently strange. Management occasionally burned the midnight oil. Yet these tones were clandestine, hurried, emanating from a wing that logic dictated should lie silent and deserted. Intrigue, that treacherous siren tugged me closer. My mop leaned forgotten against the wall. As I ghosted nearer the source, fragments of dialogue coalesced from the low thrum. Consignment lands tomorrow. Cannot afford scrutiny. Attend to any complications. A frantic drummer took up residence behind my ribs. This bore no resemblance to standard corporate discourse. I sidled nearer still, seeking purchase through a sliver of open doorway. The sight within turned my marrow to ice. 3 figures occupied the opulent office. Silas Croft, our imperious CEO, Martell, the granite-faced head of security, and a third man, whose presence I'd registered peripherally before, but never truly placed. They were clustered around a glowing monitor, scrutinizing what looked unmistakably like architectural layouts of the works. Croft's fingers stabbed at the screen. Entry point here. The night staff won't register a thing. The unfamiliar man gave a curt nod. Their discretion is assured. They are compensated sufficiently for their obliviousness. Martell interjected, his voice flat, chilling. Should anyone develop inconvenient curiosity, well, industrial setting Perhaps I inhaled too sharply. Perhaps my worn soul scraped the tile. A minuscule sound amplified in the stillness. 3 heads pivoted as one, eyes locking onto my shadowed form in the gap. Time elongated, suspended. Then, pandemonium detonated. "Secure him," Croft's command cracked like a whip. I offered no pause for deliberation. Spinning on my heel, I fled, my heart a frantic piston against my sternum. Footfalls pounded ominously close behind. My intimacy with the factory's nocturnal geography was my sole advantage, and I exploited every known shortcut, every shadowed alcove, down a service corridor, cutting through a cavernous parts depot, scrambling up a neglected stairwell. Fire bloomed in my lungs. My legs screamed protest, but raw terror propelled me onward. I erupted onto the main assembly floor, a colossal expanse populated by inert titans of machinery. Weaving between silent conveyor belts and skeletal robotic arms, my mind raced, desperately trying to assemble the overheard fragments. Consignments, complications, accidents. It painted a grim tableau of illegality, of profound danger. Escape was paramount. Find a phone, summon the authorities. But my mobile lay dormant in my locker, and surely the exits were now compromised, watched. I required ingenuity. Gasping for air behind the bulk of a stamping press, an idea sparked. The omnipresent eyes of the factory's surveillance network. It chronicled everything. Access the recordings, and I'd possess irrefutable proof of their conspiracy. But the security hub lay across the sprawling complex, and the relentless cadence of my pursuers echoed ever closer. Caution and cunning were my only allies now. Melting into the deeper shadows, I moved with practiced silence, leveraging my custodian's knowledge of patrol blind spots. Every clank of distant pipework set my nerves jangling. Each elongated shadow seemed poised to disgorge a threat. Yet, inch by agonizing inch, I navigated towards the security nerve center. The door yielded to my master key, a janitor's minor privilege now potentially life-saving. Inside, a constellation of monitors displayed silent, flickering scenes from every corner of Ironclad. And there, on one screen, 3 determined figures methodically swept through the building, their quarry unmistakable. With hands that betrayed my inner turmoil, I interfaced with the system, spooling through archived footage until the damning scene materialized. The clandestine meeting in Croft's office. I initiated the download onto a slim USB drive, my potential passport from this waking nightmare. The progress bar crawled. Just as the transfer completed, voices echoed in the corridor immediately outside, perilously close. Pocketing the drive, my gaze darted wildly, seeking egress. The ventilation grill. Narrow, but perhaps passable. I'd just wrestled the cover free when the door crashed inward. Martel filled the frame, pistol held steady, his expression a mask of glacial fury. "The end of your shift, Elias," he stated, the weapon finding my center mass. "Should have stayed with your mob." Primal instinct surged. I hurled myself towards the dark aperture of the vent, the displaced air from a fired bullet singing past my ear. I clawed my way into the ductwork, the retort of the gun, and enraged shouts receding as I squirmed deeper into the building's metallic entrails. Time dissolved in the oppressive darkness, crawling through the cramped, echoing tunnels. my skin abraded against unseen rivets. The stale air was thick and hard to draw, yet the certainty of death nipping at my heels spurred me onward. Eventually, a faint luminescence beckoned. I tumbled out onto the rooftop, the cool night air a bracing shock against my overheated skin. Below, the city lights sprawled like scattered jewels, achingly near yet worlds away. The clang of the roof access door slamming open behind me confirmed my hunters had deduced my path. Trapped, with nowhere left to retreat, I embraced the only remaining option. I leaped. The adjacent building was proximate, yet the chasm yawned terrifyingly wide. For one heart-stopping aerial moment, failure seemed inevitable. Then, jarring impact resonated through my skeleton as my feet found solid concrete. No time for relief. I scrambled upright and ran, vaulting from one graveled rooftop to the next, dredging up half-forgotten parkour skills from a more reckless youth. Behind me, frustrated shouts punctuated the night, occasionally accompanied by the sharp crack of gunfire. How I descended from those heights to the sanctuary of the streets remains a fragmented memory, a fever's dream of desperate flight through back alleys and refuse-strewn corners, perpetually glancing over my shoulder, anticipating the reappearance of my pursuers. As the first tentative fingers of dawn painted the sky, I found myself before the stoic facade of the police precinct, exhausted, bruised, yet miraculously breathing. I staggered inside, the small USB drive clutched in my fist like a holy relic. The ensuing days blurred into a maelstrom of depositions, federal agent interviews, and blaring news headlines. The drive contained not merely the incriminating conversation, but labyrinthine evidence of a vast smuggling enterprise routed through ironclad works for years. Arrests followed swiftly, ensnaring Croft, Martell, and numerous other executives. The corporation imploded under the scandal, while I was paradoxically lauded, a whistleblower, an accidental hero. Yet, even as normalcy attempted to reassert itself, the sensation of being watched lingered, a persistent phantom. The hypervigilance that had ensured my survival that night became an unwelcome tenant, making me start at sudden movements, regard unfamiliar faces with ingrained suspicion. I took the reward money and vanished, seeking anonymity elsewhere to piece together a new existence. My novel, finally completed, drew heavily from the crucible of that night, becoming an unexpected thriller sensation. Sometimes in the profound quiet of late hours, the ghost steps return, the icy tendrils of remembered fear coil in my gut. But then I anchor myself to the reality. I endured. I confronted a darkness lurking beneath a veneer of respectability, and emerged, scarred but whole. And if I could navigate that abyss, I possessed the fortitude for whatever shadows life might yet cast. The night shift at Ironclad Works irrevocably altered the trajectory of my life. It revealed the depths of human corruption, yes, but it also unearthed a resilience within me I never knew existed. Ultimately, that self-knowledge is a currency far exceeding any paycheck, any reward,